Welcome to the Link Online. I have to clear my throat there just a little bit. You know, always a great way to start. No, I do not have the coronavirus.
Are you sure?
I wasn't worried.
Yeah, pretty sure. Yeah, I don't have a temperature yet. Anyway. All right. So welcome to the program. We're just, if you're watching us live on Facebook or on the RCI channel on the YouTube, Radio Canada International, you'll see some lovely pictures across Canada and the wonderful Canadian flag. One of the most recognized flags in the world. We have, for example, the British flag, which is highly recognized, United States flag, Japanese flag, of course. It is the simple flags, I guess, that are the most recognized, although you wouldn't necessarily call the American flag or the British flag simple, but they are, of course, long-standing. All that to say, welcome to the program. We're here on the Link Online, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of information from Canada, about Canada, and Canada's viewpoints on world situations. I'd like to say hello to Radio Paris, World Radio Paris, also the shortwave service from Germany, and our friends at Kauri 97.5 FM in Nigeria. And I'm here with Vincenzo Morello.
I'm glad you guys invited me back.
Well, you're going to be here for a couple more weeks at least,
Yeah,
anyway.
so.
All right, and then Levon Savunts is with us.
Hello?
I'm Mark Montgomery, and in the control room we have Marc-André Deschamps, who's sort of looking things over there, Léo Boulanger, Benoit Durand, and of course, Commander Dutil, whom we admire and fear at the same time. All right, we have a lot of, again, you know, as usual, we have a lot of interesting stories for us. And, of course, the top one, we were just joking about coronavirus, but it is not a joke. It is very serious. There's like 400 some odd people have died now, or more than that.
We're way past 600 now.
Oh, my gosh, it's terrible.
And it grows every day.
And you have some updates on that.
Yeah, so I'll bring you the update on this very complicated evacuation of Canadian citizens from Wuhan, and we have two first groups that have arrived.
Okay, I'll be talking in a sort of a health-related issue. I'll be talking about the possible dangers from 5G network that everybody's rushing for. And Vincenzo, what's your story?
There's a question that I'm gonna ask, and can exercise make you better at video games?
Can exercise make you better?
And that's an interesting question.
Well, I've seen people with super thumbs, which I can't figure out.
I've been playing video games for as long as I can remember. I don't have super thumbs. Maybe some carpal tunnel, but not super thumbs.
Anyway, those are some of the stories coming up on this edition of The Link Online. All right, Levon, we are going to start out with your story and the coronavirus update. And we have, as you mentioned, some Canadians coming back who have been, I guess, in parentheses, rescued from Wuhan.
Well, I mean, they were certainly stuck in the city of Wuhan, a city of 11 million people, and also the surrounding regions that has been under quarantine since January 23rd. So
this is Hubei province.
This is Hubei, the central eastern Chinese province that's kind of the epicenter of this coronavirus outbreak, and that has now affected more than 28,000 people. We'll get the latest results later today. Over 600 people, most of them, 99.5% of these people, casualties in China itself. There are 2 cases outside of China that we're aware of. So, and you know, this being a big global economy, it was not surprising that it turns out there are hundreds of Canadians in the Hubei province, and more and more of them resurfaced as this crisis got more and more serious. So initially, the Canadian government started they had 2 Canadians who had contacted them saying, well, we want to get out of here. by 2 days later, they were up to 150. And yesterday, when Foreign Affairs Minister François-Philippe Champagne was giving an update on this evacuation, there were over 373. And these numbers change every day. So the Canadian government, like many other governments, the US, UK, Japan, the European Union has been organizing these airlifts to bring these Canadians back to Canada. And so today, in the early hours of the morning, one of these planes arrived at the Canadian Forces Base Trenton. That's a large Canadian military base north of Toronto. And it had on board 176 people, Canadians. Kind of to give you an example how complicated this thing was. So there were when the Canadian government submitted its list, what they called the manifest, they had 211 people on that manifest. So for these Canadians to be able to go through the roadblocks in the city of Wuhan and surrounding areas to get to the airport, they had to show this, that their name is on this list. So of the 211 people, for various reasons, family reasons, not being able to travel, only 176 in the end showed up for the flight. So that was the first flight. It took off from Wuhan and it arrived early in the hours Friday. There was another flight, a US flight, that was able to pick up about 50 Canadians, and it flew from Wuhan a couple of hours later, and it landed in Vancouver for refueling and let go these 50 Canadians. So now our Foreign Affairs Minister, François-Philippe Champagne, was talking about this, that between these two flights, 2/3 of Canadians who had expressed a kind of desire to leave Wuhan have been evacuated, and the Canadian government has chartered another plane, and we can see the images of that plane right now.
That's the first plane.
That's the first plane. That's the High Fly. It's a Maltese company that was chartered by the Canadian government to fly these Canadians. That's landing at CFB Trenton. So that same company has been chartered to fly another kind of rescue mission to Wuhan. That plane will be arriving to Wuhan on Monday, February the 10th, and they're expected to fly out the same day. I'm saying expected because this plane was supposed to take off earlier Thursday, but it was delayed because there were some strong winds in Hanoi. They're staging in Vietnam and then just taking a flight to Wuhan from Hanoi. So that's, and we're expecting that with that second plane, most of Canadians who are in Wuhan will be back in Canada, and they will be staying at CFB Trenton for 14 days. That's the quarantine period that doctors say that this is the period where if you clear it and if you're not sick, it means you're not going to be able to pass on the disease to others.
It's the incubation period.
It's the incubation period for the virus. So, but it on a very interesting note, on Wednesday, when Foreign Affairs Minister François-Philippe Champagne was talking about the Canadians in China in general, he said everybody who has no essential business in China should basically get out of China right now until there's still commercial flights flying out of China, because every day another commercial airline kind of announces that they're stopping flights because, one, there are not enough people wanting to fly. Second, a lot of countries are closing their kind of airspace to Chinese flights. So Champagne was saying, listen, if you have no essential business in China, not just in Hubei, because in the province of Hubei there is like a travel advisory and do not travel there under any circumstances. But in all of China now, get out. Because at some point, I'm guessing, the government had trouble bringing back a few hundred Canadians. Imagine there are like 15,000 Canadians that are registered with the Canadian government in mainland China, and they're
Spread out all over the place.
spread out all over the place. And in Hong Kong itself, there are about 300,000. So imagine the expense it would require if at some point all these Canadians that decide that they need to leave China. So, and there's been a lot of questions about these procedures, and Canada's Health Minister, Patty Hajdu, held a press conference, and she kind of explained a bit how the procedure works.
China has a rule for all countries that are expatriated, that are bringing repatriating people to Canada, that nobody can travel when they're sick. And don't forget, this is a global effort to stop the spread of a virus that is, including China's, what we've talked about as extraordinary efforts. You know, as Dr. Tam said recently, something that we have never seen in modern public health history, with 60 million people in quarantine. But on that question, that is why that they are so insistent that people that are ill don't leave the country. Partly because they have a global responsibility to try and contain the spread of the illness, and partly because there is no indication when someone is symptomatic how ill they might get. The range of this disease actually can, you can have very mild symptoms all the way up to having severe pneumonia and respiratory illness leading to death. Now, death is estimated right now at about 2% of the cases, relatively low, but that range is really what I think the Chinese government is concerned about. And I want to remind Canadians right now that the risk remains low to Canadians, that we still are in a situation where our officials are working extremely well together, as evidenced by how quickly we're being able to detect cases and keep people healthy. But I also want to ask that people who are traveling from the Hubei region consider isolation at home to help us with that global effort to contain that spread for 14 days.
And so you heard that was Canadian Health Minister Patty Hajdu saying that they would like all these Canadians who returned from China to kind of self-isolate themselves for 14 days, limit the contact as much as possible. While we were running that clip, we had some lively debates on our Facebook, people who are watching us, and Bob Warren was asking, first of all, he's asking about my accent. And Bob, I'm originally from Armenia. That's where the accent comes from, former Soviet Union. He was asking about these tests. So my understanding is that yes, one test could come out negative and a subsequent test could come out positive. So that's why there is a whole procedure. So it's not just one test that clears you.
Indeed, on the aircraft, before they get on the aircraft, they're sort of tested, and then on the flight they're tested, and when they land they're tested again, and they'll be followed
they'll be followed through these 14 days at CFB Trenton. There are military medics. The province of Ontario has dispatched their health professionals there as well. So they'll be very, very well followed up during monitored. Yeah. I think what raises more concerns is people returning to China from China, and the ones that kind of decide that that they follow their own symptoms, because the symptoms for this coronavirus are very similar to a normal flu. Mm-hmm. So, kind of the suggestion is that if you have anything resembling a flu, make sure that you isolate yourself, limit your contact with others in your family, and don't show up in the hospital before you actually call them and tell them that you're coming. So that's one of the things, because there are all these procedures that have been established in Canada. With the first outbreak that we had in the SARS outbreak, it's been
13 years or something?
13 years ago. So there are procedures to make sure to mitigate the risks of the virus spreading. And as Health Minister Hajdu said, so far the risk in Canada is considered very low. We have about 4 confirmed cases.
Something like
Five.
that.
And there are 3 more cases in British Columbia that they're kind of looking, and we'll see. There's some tests that have come back positive, but these tests have to be confirmed by the national lab in Winnipeg. So.
But the first case that we had here that was confirmed, he's already gone
Yeah,
home
he's-
from hospital.
yeah.
And I believe his wife is now cleared as well.
So yeah, and as she said, the symptoms may vary. It could be something as light as a light flu, to all the way to a fatal disease.
You know, the sad thing is the misinformation that's going on, and people are saying, "Oh, we don't want to go to a Chinese restaurant in Toronto because what? Come on, it's really sad that some people are doing it out of malice, and some people are doing it out of just simple misinformation and not understanding things, and it's really kind of
And this is the thing. I think people have to realize that this is a very serious disease, yes, but every year thousands of people around the world die of a simple flu.
there you go.
So, yes, this is, and if you look at the numbers, the statistics, so we're talking about 28,000 cases as of yesterday and 600 fatalities. That's about 2% fatality rate of all the cases. So, and
the simple flu is probably higher,
or somewhere around that.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a very serious outbreak in China so far. Most out of 600 something fatalities, except 2, they're all in China.
Yeah. All right, so that's our story on the coronavirus update till now. And as always, if you have any questions, you can watch us on Facebook or drop us a line via email, and we'd be glad to hear what you have to say on the whole matter. Coming up, we're going to discuss another health topic, and this has to do with that little device there.
Yes.
This little device could be dangerous. I kind of surprised the guys in the control. They weren't ready for that. I snuck up on
keep them on their toes.
All right, we're talking about these devices here and cell phones, and there's something that they emit that's called radio frequency radiation. Now, of course, as the world seems to be rushing towards the 5G network and all this internet technology of things, they're going to connect things like autonomous vehicles, of course, cell phones and other devices, household appliances. It's pretty much the whole idea.
The Internet of Things.
The Internet of Things, everything's going to be connected, So anyways, what that means is there are going to be thousands, if not hundreds of thousands more cell phone towers and billions more devices sending signals back and forth. And that means with these signals that there's going to be a lot more of these radio frequencies going around. Now, I spoke to Dr. Anthony Miller. He's a specialist in internal medicine, and he's a professor emeritus at the School of Public Health at the University of Toronto. And he is among a growing international group of scientists and medical researchers who have signed a petition saying there should be a moratorium on 5G until we understand more about the health implications of this radio frequency radiation. Because, as they say, there are already health concerns about this level of radiation that we have from current cell phones. And here he is. Here's Dr. Miller explaining a little bit about his concerns.
We now know that in terms of cell phones held close to the head, this will increase substantially the risk of brain cancer, a cancer called glioblastoma. And also we're increasingly concerned that these waves will cause other adverse health effects, including sterility and possibly increased risk of colon cancer for men who keep cell phones in their pockets. We also know that a number of people are sensitive to these waves and they become really very ill. They get headaches, they feel extremely unwell, and they have to get as far away as possible from the sources of radio frequency radiation, such as cell towers.
How does this cell phone frequency signals differ from, say, radio AM and FM signals that we've had around for
Well,
decades?
they're in a different place in the spectrum.
What's special about that frequency range they're in? Is this something like a microwave oven or something?
In many respects, it's similar to that. We know from a number of biological experiments that these waves do cause cell damage of various sorts. So in my view, and that of a number of my colleagues, we feel that we are dealing with a human carcinogen, and we should do all we can to reduce exposure to as low as reasonably achievable, something we learnt to do many years ago in relation to ionizing radiation, X-rays.
Well, Dr. Miller, where are the Canadian laws on such exposure to radiation from these signals then?
Well, they're unsatisfactory. They're not sufficiently strong. Health Canada does have regulations to prevent severe exposure to radiofrequency radiation, but this is very much out of date in terms of current knowledge.
What's the concern about 5G then?
Well, the concern about 5G is this is a new type of exposure to radiofrequency radiation. It's a somewhat different frequency. We know this type of radiation, 5G, causes damage to plants and insects. We are very worried over the proposal that multiple towers should be placed in relation to homes and residences because there's no consideration of the adverse health effects, and we believe this could be really rather dangerous to people. And the government has simply not done its job. They are simply ignoring the science. Now, some years ago, in 2011 in fact, the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer reviewed the evidence then available, and they concluded that radiofrequency radiation was a possible human carcinogen. Since then, a great deal of additional evidence has accrued from studies in a number of countries, including Canada, and from more biological investigations. And this is why I and a large number of other scientists believe that we're dealing with a human carcinogen in the same category as asbestos, X-rays, and other carcinogens. We do everything we can to avoid.
And there you have it. That was an excerpt of my conversation, or an edited version anyway, with Dr. Anthony Miller, a specialist in internal medicine and professor emeritus at the University of Toronto. And the full conversation is in the highlights section of our website. And again, it's something that we have been told about, but these stories, I remember these stories saying, you get brain cancer if you hold it up to your head all the time. Or for men, you stick it in your pocket, it might have an effect on fertility and so on. But they seem to have sort of disappeared,
The thing that I would like to investigate is that from my whatever little research I've done into 5G is that the technology, because of the kind of radio frequencies that 5G uses, they would need to put a lot more of these towers. So right now, for example, if a tower covers an area of around, let's say, 5 kilometers, with 5G, they would have to put a tower every kilometer.
Yeah.
So that means there'll be so many more of these towers around us, and kind of finding out what these towers and just these towers will do to us, plus all the devices that would come up that would have this capability of sending and receiving radio signals. So I think there's a lot of research that needs to be done before we're sure that this is safe, or what levels are safe.
Yeah, exactly. And this is one of their concerns, is we already have these cell towers all over the place. People don't even realize they're there. I mean, you'd have to, because you walk down the street, you don't look, but look up, and you'll see those little gray cylinders attached to the sides of buildings all over the place. I mean, I've seen them attached to churches, for example, because churches have steeples. So that's a nice high area, so they're attached there. And I mean, here on the top of our building, for example, this is normal, I suppose. We're a broadcaster, but there are satellite dishes and cell phone towers, or cell phone things there. Oh, it's just crazy. Yeah, so it's something to be, I guess, a little concerned about, or at least to think about it. And
come with to it with a bit of a critical mind.
yeah. All right, if you have any thoughts on that, don't hold your cell phone away.
I say bring on the future. Let's go. 5G everywhere.
So you can play your games.
Exactly.
Well, we're going to talk about your games in just a second here. All right, your story sounds a little bit, in a way, counterintuitive, because on the one hand, you're talking about video gamers who are couch potatoes and exercise. So just give us a...
So yeah, exactly. Like video games and exercise they are seen as opposite activities. But I spoke to a researcher out of McGill who did a study on this. His name is Dr. Mark Roige. And he said 2 of his students came up to him with the idea of testing out video game performance and exercise, and this is what he had to say.
The idea was quite provocative because normally video games and exercise are seen as antagonistic activities. So time that we normally use playing video games, we think that it's time that is stolen from physical activity. So that was the beginning of the idea. So what we did is basically ask video game players of a video game which is quite famous, League of Legends, which is played by millions of people. And what we did is we asked them to come one day to the lab, and we exercised them for 15 minutes before they play 20 minutes of a customized mission of the League of Legends game. And then we asked them to come back again and do the same, but without exercise. So they play the game without having exercise before the video game task. And what we found is that when they exercise, the performance in the video game improves. What they were able to do was to kill more opponents and to be more accurate in the way they were eliminating these opponents.
And why? Why you found that they were improved? They had a better performance after doing some exercise. So why, and in relation to that, why is exercise important to how a person's brain works?
Well, I have to be honest, and we didn't study mechanisms in this study, but we have a lot of evidence that even a single bout of exercise, 15 minutes of exercise, before you do a cognitive task, can improve the performance of these cognitive tasks. So there are many, many mechanisms that can be involved or could explain the positive effects of exercise in video game. One thing that exercise does is it improves what we call executive functioning. Executive functioning is the capacity to make decisions rapidly and accurately. So what we know is that if we exercise immediately before a cognitive task that requires making decisions very fast, normally we see an improvement. So what we think that happened here is that we improve attention, we improve the capacity of the brain to make decisions fast, and we also improve reaction time. And we think that these are some of the mechanisms that could explain why we saw an improvement in the video game performance.
So yeah, as Dr. Roige explained, they did find an improvement, but this is just an early first version of their study. He said he also wants to conduct more studies with different exercises and different video games. So maybe in the future they'll find a better link, but for now this is there's a chance that exercise could make you better at video games.
So is this exercise, they're doing some exercise immediately before playing, or is this exercise being in better shape generally to play?
They had done 15 minutes of like cardio exercise right before they played.
Okay, well, the thing that surprises me about these video games is how this has become a profession with big money. I saw some competition, and they were like 4 or 5 guys or something, and screens in an arena with thousands of people watching this, and I was going, wow. how times have changed from Pong. remember Pong? Do you remember Pong?
I remember Pong. I'm not that young.
Ah, those were the days. All right, as always, if you have any comments or thoughts, drop us a line via our YouTube
Or you can contact us directly via Facebook.
Who's on there now? Quickly.
We have Bob Warren, Gustavo Lucas, we have Monique Cocotte, we have Louis Caron, we have Dmitry Jacobson, Riaz Hussein, a lot of people watching us right now.
Okay, well, that's it for now for Marc-André Deschamps, Léo Boulanger, Benoît Durand, and Pierre Dutil in the control room.
Connor.
We have Vincenzo Morello,